The two questions we have are, is it a tiny human, and are we cool with killing tiny humans? Welcome back to If I'm Really Honest, where I seek truth without tribalism. It's a place where ignorance isn't punished, curiosity is rewarded, and conflict doesn't mean contempt. All right, let's be really clear about the goal here. I don't want to change your position or convince you of mine. We're just here to dispel some of the myths that you probably have about the other side so that you can be more effective in your conversations with them, and so you can believe what you believe for better reasons. And for anyone who feels skeptical that they can't really trust me because they feel like they can tell that I'm not a true Christian, I am. But also I've found that the people who frequently use the tone of a real Christian or a true Christian can't articulate what a real Christian is anyway. But no matter, let me offer this. Even if I'm not trustworthy, even if I'm your enemy, wouldn't you like to know how to better defeat your enemy? Because that's what I'm trying to give you here. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking that you learn your enemy's actual beliefs so you can make more relevant points that reach them where they actually are. This episode is made possible by Short Walks Outside. Now, you may have heard of Short Walks Outside and wondered what all the hype was about. Well, me too. That is, until I tried Short Walks Outside for myself. Let me tell you, now I get it. It's not just that short walks outside are great for your health and your mental clarity, but each package of Short Walks Outside also includes fresh air, the sky, and a freaking minute alone to myself. Not to mention the best kind of community interactions. Short ones. For the price of just a cup of coffee a day, you could experience Short Walks Outside and a cup of coffee a day. Plus, Short Walks Outside are even safe for your pets.
People who use Short Walks Outside should be careful as they may be exposed to uneven sidewalks, weather, and other minor hazards that even a toddler can navigate. Short walks outside may cause tissue damage known as muscle building, and in extreme cases may lead to long walks outside or even hiking. Short walks outside may interfere with domestic disputes and personal ruminations, so consult a psychologist if those are things you want to keep. Don't take short walks outside if your ex is currently jogging in the same neighborhood because that bitch is just trying to get in your head. Use as directed.
So get to your nearest location, and your first short walk outside will be included at no extra charge. Plus, for a limited time only, listeners to If I'm Really Honest will receive a weekly play-along track and a dose of vitamin D absolutely free. So what are you waiting for? You've got nothing to lose, except a few pounds. Get Short Walks Outside today.
Short walks outside. Just a single step counts.
First things first. Even though many churches find it expedient to frame the abortion debate as a Christians versus atheists thing, let me point out that there are many groups who claim to be Christian and believe that they are, who see certain types of termination of pregnancy as acceptable. And there are many atheists who are against abortion. Furthermore, almost 100% of human beings have a position on abortion. And yet, less than 40% of the world's population is either Christian or atheist. So most people in the abortion debate are not in either of the camps that many Christians like to pretend are the only two camps that exist. This is not a Christians versus atheists thing. Because Christians are my tribe of origin and hopefully my audience, I'm going to largely accept that misguided framework of pro-life being Christian, since for us that has been the reason for our position. But to be fair to the rest of the world, I'm not comfortable saying that everyone who is pro-choice or anti-life or however you want to label it, that they're all non-Christians or they're all atheists. I know that seems muddled, but we're a muddled species with muddled labels. In fact, I think both sides miss each other intentionally using labels. One side calls themselves pro-life, and they're obviously the good guys because only an evil person would be anti-life. Meanwhile, the other side calls themselves pro-choice, and they're obviously the good guys because only evil people want to take away someone's choice. I mean, even the craziest of right-wing nutjobs still believe that God has given us unalienable rights of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We will get into some better labels in a minute, but unfortunately, this early in the debate, I don't see the two sides agreeing on any honest biological terminology because honest biological terminology favors the pro-life side. We're talking about intervening to end a process that would continue otherwise. The mother's body and the embryo's body would both work as hard as they can to keep it alive. At the point that an abortion is on the table, even considering the surprisingly high rate of miscarriage, the likely default biological result is a live human birth. This is the crazy place in the debate where both sides have agreed on the same lie, that pro-lifers are all about culture and religion, and pro-choicers are all about science and biology, when it's exactly the opposite. The pro-choicers often try to obfuscate the obvious default biological result so that they can zoom out and look at the obvious default cultural result. After all, if I get a growth or cancer on my body, by default, biologically, it's going to continue to grow and take over and kill me. But culturally, by default, I get to do with that whatever I want to. That's even true if it's on me because of my own choices, because I put a long round thing in one of my holes, or I engaged in voluntary, unprotected second-degree burns. That doesn't mean that I'm obligated to live with the default biological results. By default, no one else gets to tell me what I must do with my own body as long as I'm not hurting someone else. And here, of course, is where we finally hit pay dirt. Because when the discussion is honest, the two questions we have are, is it a tiny human, and are we cool with killing tiny humans? Now, all the overly certain pro-lifers just clicked away because they think the conversation just ended. I think that's a lack of self-awareness because, once again, I think this is a place where both sides actually agree on both points. But first, let's get this myth out of the way. The Bible doesn't say anything about the morality of abortion. I know the Christians protest just as much as the non-Christians because both think that the Bible clearly supports their position. You just have to read it the right way, and it's all so obvious. I'm bored. If you agree, skip ahead. But for everyone who's squinting really hard to see the Bible weighing in, let's do a lightning round of the most potentially abortion-adjacent Bible verses. Anti-Christians first. Here we go. Numbers 5:11 through 31. The whole ordeal of bitter water thing. I'm bored. Read it for yourself if you know what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily talking about abortion. It could be interpreted a different way pretty easily. Also, even if it was talking about abortion, this has nothing to do with bodily autonomy. This is not going to end well for you. Genesis 2:7 says that God breathed life into Adam, and so something about breath and life, and until they take their first breath, no. Unless you're advocating for the dehumanization of everyone who can't use their lungs to breathe under their own power, this is a waste of time. Ecclesiastes 6:3 through 5 says something about a stillborn child. He's just saying it's better to be dead than be alive and miserable. It fits perfectly in Ecclesiastes, and it has nothing to do with abortion. Then we have all of the violent wars throughout the Old Testament. Granted, a lot of pregnancies were terminated here by the order of God. God's not saying that they're not humans. He ordered the killing of all of the kings and the men and the women and the children, and those were all people. Now, if you want to use these verses to talk about how God is an inhumane monster, that's a different discussion. But there's no reference that helps the abortion debate here. Lastly, Exodus 21:22 through 25. This one's a little bit problematic because the whole thing, if the two men are fighting and then the woman is injured and the embryo dies, there's just a fine. But if the woman dies, it says, well, then you have to pay life for life, implying that the other thing was not life for life. And so it seems like there's a really strong implication that God doesn't see the killing of an embryo the same way that he does the killing of a person. But frankly, I am unaware of a single Christian who is so weak in their faith that they won't be able to sidestep this one passage out of the whole Bible. But in the end, the anti-Christian complaint is that the Bible is regressive and racist and misogynistic and homophobic. If that's the case, I don't think you're going to find any supporting verses in here for your modern bodily autonomy or women's right to choose. All right, now Christians, let's talk about Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. This isn't about a fetus. This is explicitly about God knowing you before you were a fetus. Read it again.
Before I formed you.
This doesn't help the abortion debate. Job 31 and Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. This does address the obvious fact that before you were fully knit, you were in your mother's womb. No one is refuting this. The question is, in what point of the knitting does it become a sweater? This verse does not help. Luke 1:41 through 44, John the Baptist leapt in the womb at Mary's greeting. Fetuses still leap. This does not address the morality of abortion. Exodus 20:13 says, you shall not murder. Again, not helpful. Moses gave this instruction to the Israelite adults about how to treat each other within society. None of it had to do with how to parent, much less how to treat a fetus. In fact, don't tell the atheists, but God continued making amendments after this verse. And in Deuteronomy 21, God went back to clarify that parents absolutely shall murder their kids under the right circumstances. Look, we don't have to debate Deuteronomy. I don't even want to be talking about Exodus. But the Ten Commandments absolutely don't address abortion. They're about civilization and hierarchy. And maybe you think that God is hinting at abortion and you just have to be perceptive enough to read between the lines. But let's be honest, if God could see into the future and he knew that we would be searching the Bible to find verses to uphold his position on the greatest genocide in human history, and he wanted to give us a little boost, he could have just gone to the end of any of the 66 books that he authored and just scribbled 2 words at the end. Don't abort. But he didn't. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't care. It does mean that he didn't want to make that one thing perfectly clear in his book. And I don't think we're qualified to copy edit his writing. He didn't want to say it clearly in his book. So we shouldn't quote mine it to make it sound like he did. Now the good news is, as a Christian, if you want to say that a fetus is a Homo sapien, you can just say it. You don't need the Bible. It's pretty obvious. What other species could it be? A dog? Do you think it's going to come out as a cat? It's a human. So stop mangling the Bible and just stand up for the position that you actually hold. Now, let's get back to the positions without the contorted verses. Now, first, is it a tiny human? Obviously, yes. Even all the pro-choice biologists I've ever heard say there's nothing special about crossing the labial finish line that suddenly makes this creature one of our species. So even they think it's a human. But those same pro-choicers, much like the pro-lifers, seem afraid that if they give up any ground, they're going to have to give up all their ground. So we conduct these stupid conversations about the born and the unborn, pretending that anybody thinks it really matters. The truth is, when it's born, it's still not fully cooked. A horse, when it's born, it's fully cooked. It gets out and starts horsing around almost immediately. The same is true for most mammals, because they don't let the little bugger out until it's ready to fend for itself. But our big fat heads don't actually fit out the hole once we're past about the 9-month mark. Frankly, having witnessed the birth of my own 6 kids, 9 months is pushing it. And so, humans have to poop them out before they're fully cooked. And they just lay there as uncooked little burritos, fully dependent on their parents for years and years before they could ever outrun a predator. So a toddler or an infant is just a little embryo that's cooking on the outside instead of on the inside. If this is a tiny human, this is a tiny human. Mama just couldn't afford to go out xenomorph style. So then we're on to the harder question. Now, contrary to my own personal beliefs, I don't think most Christians think that life actually begins at conception. Many of them have those words on their mouth while they simultaneously have a you-know-what up their you-know-where. And I'm not being pedantic, I'm being precise. An abortion is where you go in, either chemically or physically, and make a living embryo's environment unlivable. And a great deal of pro-lifers' contraception is where they go in, either chemically or physically, and make a living embryo's environment unlivable. If life begins once an egg is fertilized, then taking a nurturing environment and intervening to ensure that its environment is artificially hostile, that is taking a life. After all, you can't lock your 3-year-old in a freezer and then tell the judge, oh, it wasn't my fault, it just wasn't viable in that hostile environment. I'm not sure, but I think the pro-choicers don't push this point because they're afraid the pro-lifers are going to realize the contradiction and then take away even more contraceptive options. I don't know. They haven't invited me to their secret meetings yet, but I know this point seems too obvious to be unique to me. To be fair, some contraception does prevent ovulation so that no embryo is formed, But this is once again where I end up being more life-affirming than the pro-lifers, because I think the egg and the sperm should count as life too. I mean, they're literally alive, and they're not aspiring to become great dolphins or great elephants. This is obviously really early human life, but I'm super crunchy that way. I see the plants and the animals that become food, that become waste, that become the plants, that become the food, that becomes us. And I can't help but feel like the magic never really stops. Each seed is teeming with the potential that, if given just the slightest opportunity, will eagerly grow into the plant that will bear the fruit that will someday sustain me, my kids, their kids. So I think the Catholics got this theory right. If you're intervening, you're stopping a life that was going to continue to join this world. But also, 6 kids is plenty. Okay, so here the miscarriage stats actually do matter. Because most embryos that make it to a month are eventually going to have a birthday, so many embryos don't make it to a month that most embryos don't survive. Now, where I came from, we said that an abortion was when a person intervened to stop a pregnancy. Miscarriages were when God intervened to stop a pregnancy. In both cases, it was because someone didn't want it to exist or because it wasn't going to be viable or as a punishment. But it was only an abortion when humans did it, which is fair. But since most embryos don't make it, that means that God was intervening in most of human life to stop it before it ever got to be born. All the humans that you see alive on Earth, there were more than those humans as embryos that God intervened and stopped their life. And we said that was the loving thing to do because obviously the embryo didn't suffer, which was a sentence that we vehemently disagreed with whenever someone said that about a human-caused miscarriage. So, is it a tiny human? Yes. Are we cool with killing tiny humans? Well, we're obviously not cool with being cool with killing tiny humans, and I like that. This is why most pro-choicers that I've talked to are anti-abortionists. In fact, I don't know anyone who is pro-abortion in the same way that I don't know anyone who's pro-chemotherapy. If the topic is relevant, it's a bummer. Unfortunately, sometimes people are careless with contraception and tanning beds, and other people are just unlucky, making the unfortunate topics of abortion and chemotherapy sadly relevant. But it seems like we've got a lot of common ground, because the pro-lifers are merely really super early only termination advocates, and the pro-choicers are merely several weeks later termination advocates. But common ground doesn't make for very strong nonprofit donations, nor inspired voting blocks that can be emotionally manipulated. So, pro-choice and pro-life it is, I guess. The good news is, whether you choose team pro-life or pro-choice, either way you'll have a warm community affirming that you're one of the good ones. And those other people over there who believe the exact same thing as you but off by a few weeks, those are pure evil villains. Time out real quick before we end. I need to give a nod here to the argument about souls. The question here is whether it's okay or not to terminate a soul. Once again, I think that everyone actually agrees. No. No matter how you define a soul, or even if you don't think that they exist, the extermination of something that seems to have a soul should not be done lightly. But once again, I find myself more religious than my religious friends, because I think that whatever that thing is that humans have that make it a deep and sacred tragedy whenever it expires, my dog has that thing. And if he dies before I do, my house will have one less person, one less personality, one less soul in it. And I have a lot more to say about that extremely depressed chimp that's at the zoo, who definitely has a soul because it calls to me every time I'm there. This is why the Christian church has long stated that animals have souls. Traditionally, the church just said that they don't participate in the salvation and damnation dance that humans do. But many hopeful Christians have told their kids, and I think believed it, that their pets would be with them in heaven. This is not fringe. If you strip away everything except the fundamental mere Christianity and the problem of pain, Christian heroes like C.S. Lewis speculated that pets may inherit the salvation of their owners. Don't forget, you don't trust me. I'm not the one saying this. It's C.S. Lewis. In fact, Christianity has held this view about pets longer than they've held the view that humans are given souls at conception. If you want to fact check me, the theological term you want to look up is ensoulment. And even though the church, like most atheists, have always largely wanted to avoid abortions wherever possible, it wasn't until extremely recently, 1869, that the church took its most recent view that probably all fetuses are equally ensouled. And for a less Catholic side quest, you can look up the claims that during the 1970s, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, James Dobson, and Beverly LaHaye whipped up focus on abortion that wasn't really a major Christian issue before that. And with the political guidance of Edwin Meese and Richard Land, they were able to create a political voting bloc with that one issue, using their political clout to fight back against desegregation. This became most uncomfortably displayed when Bob Jones University lost its tax-exempt status over racial discrimination. Now, I'm not saying that white Christian leaders of the 1970s made up the abortion issue in order to gain political clout so that they could reinstitute segregation. That sounds a little too simplistic and a little too conspiratorial to me. But I do think that you'll learn a lot of things that you didn't know if you temporarily listen to the people who think that they did. What I am saying is that whether through Catholic history or Protestant history or Christian theologians or your own personal experience with your furry roommates, the debate about souls and abortion is anything but an open and shut case regarding human fetuses. But again, neither side tolerates nuance, so as you were. And now for a little jumpstart for all you overly certain heroes and villains. To help you improve your bias-confirming trollcraft, I give you Trollbot 3000. Take it away, buddy.
Nice work trying to seem unbiased. You're obviously just a sin-loving atheist. If you ever actually read the Bible, you'd actually know it says that all human life is sacred. And you seriously think sperm are little humans? You're obviously just another science-denying Christian, spouting your biologically illiterate nonsense, or else you'd be standing up for women's rights instead of trying to steal them away, like all your fascist, alt-right friends in the male patriarchy. You should read a book. Also, your hair looks like a janitor's mop made out of pubes.
It's pubes, and Trollbot, you're not being very nice. And I guess I don't disagree with all of those points, so maybe that's a good place to start the conversation. I surely won't believe all the same exact things by the time you watch this video. So after you gift me a like and subscribe, then head into the comments section and help me improve my thinking so I can credit you when I change my mind. Actually, real quick, I've already shifted a little bit about this. You see, I personally know several cases where even Christians agree those pregnancies should be on the very short list of terminable pregnancies. But they kept it, and they say it's been the absolute joy of their life, the best decision they ever made. This is super uncomfortable for the pro-choice side of my brain. On the other hand, I know several cases of mothers who wanted pregnancies. In fact, they were ecstatic to finally get that human that was theirs to own and love them forever. And to avoid getting too dark and terminating my own relationship with these video platforms, let's just say I have great empathy for them. And if I were in their shoes, I too would wish that I had never been born. This is uncomfortable for all the parts of my brain. So in the end, I don't trust humans to be able to reliably tell which pregnancies will be a net positive and which ones will merely add to the suffering in our world. I wish there was a group of therapists or doctors or a guy in the sky who could tell us what the rule always was that always works. The terrifying part is, I think we're going to have to do our best on this one, and then hope that the people that come after us learn from our well-intentioned mistakes and then do even better than us. I think we ask the therapists and the doctors and the guy in the sky as we try to find a holy way to honor what is sacred, knowing that we're going to disagree about the details, but also knowing that our world and our kids' world is going to be a better one if we start with common ground and then move with empathy and compassion from there. This all connects to my upcoming episode on how and when to change your mind, so make sure you're subscribed so you get notified when that releases. And hopefully, whether you agree with me or not, it's obvious that I've spent considerable effort putting this together so you could have it for free. So I'd really appreciate it if you would do something for free and just click a couple buttons and we can keep this good thing going between us. And if you think this is in the 51 percentile of quality content on the internet, then become a super fan for free and let the algorithms know. That way we can keep this love train rolling. Be well, my distant cousins. I'm rooting for you, and you should too.